Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark Stay.
And I'm Mark Devone. Today we'd like to thank our patron of the week. Our patron of the week is none other than Ashok Banker. Thank you, Ashok, for joining our merry band of patrons. Ashok's going to be getting tons of extra bonuses, hundreds of hours of deep dives, access to all kinds of extra goodies. So if you want to be like Ashok, please pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support and become a supporter of this podcast. Yeah. Mr. Stay, how are you doing?
I'm okay, man. Yeah, it's good. Quick plug. Unwelcome, that film what I wrote about goblins, is now on Shudder in the USA.
Ooh, that's a biggie.
Well, Shudder is the big horror streamer. It's the USA only. I think over here, I think it's going to be on Sky Movies at some point. I don't know. I'm the writer. I'm the last person to know. I know it's on Paramount Plus in Australia for some reason. But yeah, in the States, it's just gone up on Shudder. It's exclusive streaming on Shudder. I mean, you can still rent it from Apple and Amazon if you want. But yeah, and the weirdest thing has happened is that loads of people really love it. It's just so weird. You know about this.
You found your market, haven't you?
We found our tribe. Yeah, it's been great. It's been popping up in my mentions again. So it's been great. And things like people have discovered the spoiler special that we did, and they're like, "Where has this been? I need to know this ending. I need to know how the red caps were done." So yeah, that's been really, really, really fun this week. So yeah.
I also saw as well, you posted on Facebook that Rick Astley knocked it out of the park with a cover version that he did at Glastonbury this weekend.
Glastonbury, yeah. It was Rick Astley won Glastonbury. And I don't know if you folks know, but Rowan Coleman, who's been a guest quite a few times on the podcast, her husband is Rick Astley's guitarist. So it was just fantastic seeing him on stage, you know, doing these amazing guitar solos because he's playing AC/DC and stuff like that.
Yeah. Never Going to Give You Up, the big, obviously, you know, it'd be a bit of a shame if he hadn't have played that. But I seem to remember I watched the Glasto kind of highlights and he got a massive guitar solo. So if you saw that, you know what we're talking about. Yeah, I'll tell you what, Mark, I don't want to bang on about it, but I do. I so miss not being able to be there. It just breaks my heart. It is such a
Why is that, Mr. D? Why is that, Mr. D?
Why? Oh, why?
Have you been to Glastonbury?
Get your drinking glasses at the
ready, your bingo cards ready, folks, listeners.
Because if you're new to this podcast, you don't realise I played Glastonbury 3 times.
No, really? Yeah, 3 times? It goes up every time. I thought it was twice.
But the highlight for me this year was a text that the two of us exchanged. It was about midnight my time on Thursday.
This was so
night.
Weird.
It was Friday. This is so surreal. And fans of Back to Reality, and if you haven't read Back to Reality, this is going to be giving you the reason to read it. So, Mark, picture the scene. I'm going to bed. I'm putting my phone away, as I always do. I had a quick look on the BBC News, and the third article on the main BBC News was Glastonbury gate crashers, and I'm like, oh, got to read this. And as I started to read it, I started to think, hang on a minute. This is a scene from our book.
This is our book.
And then I instantly texted you and I said, Mark, and literally we were reading it at the same time. It was whatever really it was, 8 o'clock in the morning for you. Because you said, I was just reading the article.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you didn't see it, folks, we'll put a link in the show notes. This is beyond insanity. So when we were, for those of you that don't know, our book Back to Reality, the third act of Back to Reality is, I mean, is it a spoiler? We have to say it, right? It's not spoiling it. It's the journey to Glastonbury, right? Yeah. For our protagonist who's trying to live out a dream of playing Glastonbury. And the problem with our poor protagonist, Johanna, or Joanna, depending on where you're at in the book, she can't get in. She can't get into Glastonbury. So her manager decides to tell her about a certain bloke on the outside perimeter fence that she can go and see, in quotes, and hand him an envelope with some money in it. And should we just tell the story, Mark? I guess we have to.
I don't want to spoil it. All I can say is I went back and I read it, and I haven't read Back to Reality probably since we published it, to be honest. And I was reading, going, this is actually really good. This is good. This is a good book. I won't spoil it, but needless to say, reality and unreality crossed paths.
Yeah. So I mean, all we'll say is if you if you read that story about people breaking into Glastonbury illegally, it is actually taken from our book, and we could not believe. I mean, I had all kinds of mixed feelings because I felt really awful the fact that people were getting into Glastonbury because they'd copied this crazy bonkers idea that we'd written about. But it was literally word for word, folks. It's gone really bad. And it is absolutely crazy that people even attempted this. Like this idea that, I really want to talk about it, but we can't. Just, okay, folks, it's the summertime in the Western Hemisphere. This is a summertime read. And it's actually a wintertime read, isn't it, Mark, in Australia, New Zealand.
Absolutely.
But the point is, read the book and then go and read the story that we'll put a link to in the show notes, because the thing that I find fascinating, though, is you just never quite know when you write something. You don't know what it might end up doing in the world. And that's what's fascinating for me, is that it goes way beyond just telling a story or coming up with some fun ideas. Because like you say, sometimes, in fact, a lot of the headlines we're kind of talking about, the reality, fiction becoming reality in reference to the book. So anyway, we'll leave that there. Go buy the book, go read it. It's bonkers, absolutely bonkers.
Having come down from your Glastonbury high, what's been going on in your world, Mr. D?
Well, actually, this week's been a bit of a writing week. I sat down on Tuesday with a new idea for something I wanted to write about. Now, it is nonfiction because, that's been one of my dreams, is to write a nonfiction book. And I cracked out 5,000 words in a day, which I don't think I've ever done. In fact, 5,000 words in one sitting.
Wow.
Yeah. It's almost like, we talk about on the podcast about finding your flow, and I've been trying different angles on different things, and I find it really hard. Things just haven't got going. But this particular topic that I started writing on, it just all came out. And so it's really inspired me. And I'm thinking, God, if I could actually have a proper project to focus on with a deadline, because I know that's the one thing, the number one thing I've learned. If I had a deadline to finish a project.
If only there was some sort of model for setting a goal and being accountable to people. That's a good idea for a podcast, isn't it? If only, you could also just write a little bit every day. Maybe, I don't know, let me pluck a figure from out the air, 200 words a day.
Well,
wouldn't that be weird?
Do you know what's really weird? We've heard the term cobbler's shoes, right? Or who cuts the barber's hair, right?
Yeah.
I often feel like that because on this podcast, you've got it down, Mark. Because you've got a book deal and you're writing and you're knocking down and you're cracking those words and you've got it. It's part of your life now.
Yeah, it is.
I'm so busy running the 200 word challenge.
There's the excuse. No, to be fair, he does run the academy, and that is a full-time job.
It is a full-time job. So, but I'm got to a point now. I definitely got to a point now where I think I need I'm toying with this idea of I need a new experiment. I need a year project.
Right.
Because I think I really feel inspired right now. And the other thing is I got to do this. I hit a decade birthday this year, and it's bringing up all kinds of interesting emotions for me. And I keep thinking, if I don't do this now, I'll be regretting this in another 20 years. I wanted to do this 15 years ago when I was in my 30s.
Yeah. So
I've just been toying with this idea of, I've actually had this really crazy idea of creating a blog, and instead of writing the book, actually writing articles around all the different things I'd love to cover. And the problem with me is I have too many ideas. Like literally I could give you 100 different things I'd love to write a nonfiction book on. And I just don't know what to write about. And I know we've got a course in the academy for novel writers, which is like, what do you do when you have a million ideas? Like, which one do you pick? And I've just been struggling and spinning with that for the last few years. So I've had this crazy idea, Mark, of writing a blog post about one of the subjects each week and seeing what the response is. Because I was actually doing a bit of an analysis. A lot of people know James Clear, the author who wrote Atomic Habits, which has been this amazing runaway success. 15 million copies of that book have been sold. He's got a mailing list of 2 million people. And it started as a blog in 2013, I believe. But he was writing about millions of different things like the healthcare system. And then he started writing a bit about habits. And he noticed that the habit articles started to get a lot of traction and people really connected with that. He got a lot of comments and a lot of people were engaged with it. And so I thought to myself, well, he was in a similar position to where I am now, which is what to choose to write about. And I don't want to spend a year writing about something and putting a book out there and realize no one really wants to read about that, because that's a year of your life that just has gone.
Welcome to my world.
Well, no, but it is. That is one of the biggest challenges to write in the non-fiction world. It's about writing a proposal, getting that proposal accepted, and then writing the book with the publisher or the editor, and you write as you go. Whereas in the novel writing world, it's completely different. You've got to write the whole thing, and then you've got to pitch it. In most cases, I know.
Yes,
there's a lot
but
of
I mean, the thing is, if I write a fantasy novel, I know there are a certain number of fantasy of the 8 billion people in the world. There's going to be a few who will want to read a fantasy novel. Yes. Whereas if you're coming up with, some idea about a thing, there's not necessarily a guarantee they're going to be out there. So what's your plan, Mr. D?
Well, I don't know.
Because if you listen, you can listen to the listeners. They're all leaning forward. They're going, do it, do it, do it, do it. So they all want you to do it because they've heard you talk about stuff before. Yeah. And, about, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this. So we need to focus you, Mr. D. We need to figure out what it is you want to write.
I'll tell you what, give me a week to think this through. I do think something is bubbling under the surface here. I do like the idea, and I want to tie it into experiments as well. That's partly what the whole, because it's on theme, right, with what we're doing. It's around the idea, the concepts around the idea of life thinking of life as one big experiment, and so you don't keep beating yourself up when you fail, right? Yeah. So it's about trying and learning and getting a bit. So there's a bit of on theme. A lot of it's going to be linked to what we've been doing the last 6 years, and then some of it's probably going to be linked to my journey over the last 5 years, which has been kind of like a bit of a kind of an emotional roller coaster as well. It could be quite an interesting concept, shall I say. So give me a week. Maybe the first part of the research of this is are people even bothered?
Yeah, let us know.
Am I bothered?
Am I
bothered? Would you be interested in me? Because this is what I want. This is what I want to do. Is I want to make this market research led. I want to write something that people would actually want to read about.
Yeah.
Because honestly, life's too short to spend a year writing. I really do feel that. And when you start to get into your latter decades, shall we say, it becomes a little bit more focused, doesn't it?
You don't
have to focus the mind, right?
Yeah, you don't want to waste your time. Well, listeners, get in touch. What do you think of this idea? What sort of book would you love to hear to read from Mr. D? And then you can start pitching some of those ideas to us and Mr. D, and we'll see what sticks.
So we'll see what sticks.
He looks scared, listeners.
I am.
If you watch this on YouTube,
I am worried, to be totally honest, because when I start thinking about these kind of things, because of what stuff I've done in the past, I can't do stuff small,
half-heartedly. Yeah, I know.
Right?
And I had the same
Glastonbury, or I had the
same feeling before we did the podcast. I remember coming off a Skype call. That's how long ago it was. I don't use Skype anymore. I remember coming off the Skype call and thinking, if I do this, I have to commit to this. This is gonna take up a big chunk of my life, and you're kind of all in or nothing. And it really was like that. I was thinking I could walk away, and I'm so glad I did it. It's one of the best things I've ever done. It's been great for my writing, for my career, meeting you and all the listeners and all the people I met off the back of it. And it was the tipping point of the roller coaster. It was the bit where your belly flips over. But I'm still screaming. It's the best thing I've done. So I know the fear. Feel the fear and do it anyway. There's an idea for a book.
Actually, I could use
so let us know, listeners. Let us know.
Yeah. Watch this space, folks. Watch this space. To be continued. Anyway, Mark, let's dive in. Talking of exciting things, we have a very inspiring interview this week, don't we?
It's fantastic. We've got Katherine Faulkner, who is a novelist and a journalist. She's worked as an investigative reporter. She's won the Cudlip Award for undercover work. She's the former head of news for the Sunday Times, but she's now a full-time novelist. And her debut novel, Greenwich Park, was selected as a Waterstones Thrill of the Month and is an international bestseller. And we discuss, among many other things, the importance of structure and accountability for writers, adapting a British novel for the American market, and keeping the reader at the forefront of your mind.
Brilliant stuff. And there's one line in this interview, folks, that is worth the cost of admission alone. So we'll talk about that after the interview. So let's dive in and listen to Mark chatting with the incredible Katherine Faulkner.
Katherine Faulkner, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm very good indeed. Thank you. Spring is in the air. It's blue skies and everything. It's finally feel like we're turning some sort of corner. But let's talk about your second novel, Other Mothers, which I love that this goes into the sinister world of playground mums, which if you've ever been a parent in a playground, those little cliques, those little cabals, they can be really intimidating, can't they? But you've told a fantastic story that begins with this. Tell us about Other Mothers.
So The Other Mothers tells the story of a freelance journalist called Tash, who is kind of looking to relaunch her career after having a baby, having her son. And she's also looking for something else, which is friendship, I guess, and camaraderie in the company of other mothers. She sees these other mothers at the quite bougie playgroup that she's chosen for her son, where she's trying to get him to settle in so she can actually do some work and work on her freelance career. And they seem to have these incredibly glamorous lives and everything she doesn't, beautiful houses in Highbury in North London. Whereas Tash is sort of stuck in a basement flat with a broken dishwasher with her husband, Tom, and just can't quite see why they can't seem to make it work and can't seem to have the life that these women seem to so effortlessly enjoy. Tash gets interested in the case of a nanny who was found dead in her local wetlands in North London, Woodbury Wetlands, which is a real place, a very beautiful place. And this death was written of this nanny called Sophie was written off as an accident, but Tash is convinced there's more to it. But in order to investigate it, she needs to get her son settled in this playgroup. And these other glamorous mothers sort of invite Tash into their gang and say, well, you know, he can come for play dates. Why doesn't he become friends with our children? And their life is very seductive to Tash. And she's sort of taken aback by how quickly she's welcomed into their group. And as her investigation into Sophie's death continues, she starts to realize there may be some overlap between Sophie's life, the life of this murdered nanny, and the lives of these glamorous women. So Tash is then in the difficult position of being sort of investigating a case which involves these women that have recently provided her the friendship she's been craving. And as time continues, Tash starts to wonder, is she keeping an eye on these women or are they keeping an eye on her?
It's such a brilliant conceit because it's like all the best thrillers. It takes something that's kind of everyday for a lot of people, you know, playground mums and the relationships that we have, and then turns it on its head and makes it really, really sinister. Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but, you know, I've been there as a parent. You stand in a playground and you kind of think, who do I talk to here? This is all kind of awkward and it's a bit shy. And, you know, had you experienced that as a parent?
I think we all experience those moments where we suddenly feel like we're back in the playground.
Yeah.
And I think weirdly, parenthood throws you back into those situations. You know, with my first novel, Greenwich Park, was very much inspired by the experience of going to antenatal classes and suddenly being in a room with all these strangers and expected to share all these intimate things about your life. And then with this new book, it was sort of my daughter starting playgroup and trying to get her settled there. And you know, children have their own mind. And if they don't want to go, they just won't go.
Yeah. And
so you can be in your most vulnerable, awful moments of parenting with your child screaming and you're trying to calm them down in front of a load of strangers who, by the way, it'd be quite nice to sort of befriend and for them to not think you're a complete nutcase, for them to actually maybe think you're a bit cool, or, you know, and it all goes out the window because parenting is so crazy. So I found all that really interesting, just the dynamics of that, you know, because before you have children, you kind of have your own life, you have your friends, you have the people who, you know, that you're your people, and you have your professional life and your professional friends and colleagues. And then suddenly you're thrown into this completely new world. And it's a great level of parenting. And you're thrown into situations where, you know, the parents at your school gate might be nothing like you, or they might be from any walk of life. They could be anyone, you know, but there's a sort of presumed intimacy. So I love the tension between that and the kind of wrinkles that creates between people. And I find it might be mundane to some people, but to me, it's really fascinating because this is just the stuff of our lives. And I just think people and the way that they relate to each other, especially when it's kind of polite on the surface and then what's digging underneath that, I just find totally fascinating.
It is brilliant. For me, it's sort of Mean Girls meets Motherland. It's all of those nightmares bundled into one. It's terrific stuff.
Somebody actually, a brilliant other author, Fiona Barton, wrote on Twitter yesterday, she's reading a proof of The Other Mothers, and she wrote that it was like going into the dark side of Motherland. And I
Right.
that.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Let's go back to where it all started, because as I understand, you used to make stapled together books out of stories and give them to parents and teachers. So this is a long time coming. This dream of yours to be published.
Yeah, it is for sure. I mean, I didn't even really know that what I was doing was a thing, I think, when I was in sort of year 2, year 3, and I was making my stapled together books. But I've always written stories. I just love writing. I've loved stories, and it's just a thread that's kind of carried with me all through life. And I think writing creatively just came really naturally to me as a child, and was something that I did and have always done, actually, whether anyone's asked me to or not, you know. But I think what's kind of sad is that it kind of goes away, you know, when you're in secondary school, or it's sort of like, right, be serious now, you know, we're not making up stories anymore. We're studying proper books, or we are learning about the components of language, and it all suddenly gets a little bit colourless. And so I kind of thought to myself, well, I'm someone who likes to write. That's what I know about myself. So and I was also interested in politics and history. So I ended up studying history and going into journalism, and I had a really fantastic career in journalism, enjoyed it thoroughly, and it was a great job for me. But secretly kind of carried on always writing stories, writing. I've written lots of different things, most of which will never see the light of day. And I wrote a lot of things as a student and in my 20s, which I knew deep down weren't very good, you know. But Greenwich Park felt different. And there were a few things that just suddenly changed in my life. First was that I had my first baby, and I had maternity leave, which people do say it's nuts that you wrote a book on your maternity leave. But for me, I had an incredibly demanding job. And for me, it did feel like time and space, kind of mental space, to explore this story. And of course, you know, there's no secret. You just have to get a little bit of childcare. So once my daughter was 6 months old, I started getting one day a week, somebody's coming to help me. Right. And I used to sit down and write. And I also did this course, an evening course, one day a week, going to the Faber Academy. And that gave me a kind of structure and an accountability. Right. And between those two things, and obviously writing a bit on weekends, and my husband being incredibly supportive and helpful, and having family nearby, which I'm lucky with, I kind of managed to put something together which was the first time I'd put together a first draft of a book. And I was spurred on to finish because I really felt Greenwich Park was a good idea, and I loved writing it. I had so much fun writing it, you know, the interactions between these two mad characters, Helen and Rachel. I just enjoyed spending time with them, really. And then at the end of the Faber course, there's this amazing moment where they invite agents in to the Faber Academy, and everyone who's been on the course, this novel writing evening course that I was on, gets to read a chapter of their book. And then if any agents are interested, they kind of come up to you afterwards. And I had this incredible moment where lots of agents came over and said, "We love this, and please send me the full manuscript when it's ready." And that was kind of incredible for me. And I just suddenly thought, oh my God, you know, this might be published. This might be a real thing. And so I went back to work, and I was trying to finish it, which was really hard work. So I had a baby, I had a new job. Actually, I went to a new job after my maternity leave, which was quite a big job as head of news at the Times. And I also was trying to finish this manuscript, but I had these agents in my head, and I knew that they wanted it, and it drove me on to finish it. So it took me a while actually after that, but I did finish something, and I sent it off to agents, and then I had lots of interest in it, and even my kind of dream agents who I sent it to, who I never expected to hear back from, wanted it. And so yeah, it was extraordinary, really. But that's kind of how it all happened.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. Let's take a step back. And Katherine, we were talking about this before we started recording. We both appreciate that blokes never get asked about writing with families and children, that sort of thing. So I'm aware that women get asked this sort of stuff all the time, but I do know there will be listeners out there trying to juggle family and work and what have you. So when you took that maternity leave, like you say, you found that one day a week and carved out time to write. The accountability side of it, who are you being accountable to, or did that come with the course?
No, it's a good question. I think for me, the Faber Academy course was really great. So I just for the structure, really, as much as anything. So I had the idea for Greenwich Park when I was pregnant, and I was in the antenatal class, and I had this idea that I had already had this germ of an idea about how do you unmake a friendship? What if you make friends with somebody that you meet and then you can't get rid of them?
Right.
And I love that idea. But then it was when I was in my antenatal group that I thought, oh my God, this is the setting, right? Because it's so weird. And what if I met someone here and I was pregnant and I met another pregnant woman and then I couldn't get rid of them because we had our babies at the same time? And I just thought this would be great fun. So I started
it's very relatable. Sorry to interrupt.
I think that's what's so lovely. And I've actually become this weird sort of agony aunt of NCT nightmares now. So now that the book's out there and it's, a lot of people have read it, I get messages all the time from people saying, well, you think that was weird, I'm sure what happened at our NCT club, it's so funny. I get all these incredible stories. But yeah, so I had that idea, and then I started kind of writing it when I was pregnant, and then the baby was born, and obviously everything goes out the window for 3 months at least. You don't sleep, you're just in a completely new world. But luckily my baby was not too bad. My first baby, I say specifically, not my second baby. But she did sometimes sleep, and when she would fall asleep, she would always fall asleep in the pram. So I got in the habit of putting the laptop under the pram, and then when we're in the park, as soon as she was asleep, I'd find a cafe, whack the laptop out, and I'd just do a bit,
Right.
And then maybe when I was about 5 months in, I thought, I said to my husband, I'd really like to write this book, and I feel like now's the time. And he said, well, why don't you apply for this Faber course thing? Because I had a friend who had done it at work, and then she'd gone and written a novel and quit in her job, and now she was being a novelist. And I was incredibly jealous of this girl. So I just, and it kind of made me realize, well, you need to do that. You've got it. She's doing it. You need to go and do it. And you can do it. It's possible. It's a thing that a journalist can do. So I did it. So my husband said, do this course. I'll look after her one night a week. Obviously, you just go off and do it. So I went off and did it, and it was sort of 7 till 9 p.m. every Tuesday or Thursday night or something in Bloomsbury Square, which is this lovely bit of London. And it was heaven, just being away from the baby for starters, but also just having my notebook and pen, and then using this part of my brain, talking about books, talking about writing with this group of interesting, clever people that I would have never otherwise met, who were all writing very different books. It was utterly joyful. And that for me was the structure. So I had that accountability every week. And as part of the course, you bring in your work and share it with people, which is terrifying, of course, because I had been kind of hiding away, right? I even had password protected files on my laptop of my writing. So I was so sort of embarrassed of it and didn't want to share it. I mean, who's going to hack into my laptop and read my boring stories that I'd written? Nobody. But anyway, and then once you get over that, you realize, oh my gosh, this is incredible to share my work and have feedback and have people enjoy it. And then that becomes a bit of a drug, and you think, I really want to get it published, because and then the people on the course want to know what happens next, and so it really spurred me on. And the friends I made there were brilliant, and it's a really supportive group as well. And we still kind of share tips and spur each other on, which is so lovely, several years later. So that structure was important to me. But, if you have children, you can't write without childcare. That's it. I could do a bit when she was napping, and if you have one baby, that works. It doesn't work on your second maternity leave, I found, to my cost.
Right.
It doesn't work at all, especially if there's a lockdown. But there's no magic formula. You have to have childcare, and it's just not talked about as a thing. And I naively even said to my accountant when I started being a proper writer, and he said, well, all your expenses against writing, you can write them all down and we claim them. And I just said, well, what about childcare? My number one thing is I need childcare. That's all I need to write is childcare. And he was like, oh no, that doesn't count. That's just because this system was invented by men for whom childcare is not something they have to worry about. Maybe in the olden days, I know lots of men now do, are very engaged in that, but so that's just what it is. And you have to have and if you don't have that luxury, then unfortunately probably there's loads of books that don't get written because childcare is so expensive, basically. It just it's awful. But
yeah, well, it's headline news at the moment as well about this is a time bomb that's been going off for something, Anyway, well, thank you for sharing that. I really do appreciate it. Of course, now you were a journalist as well, and incredible career as a journalist. What were the lessons that you took from journalism that you took into your prose writing?
Oh, so many. I mean, having been a professional writer in a very different way, but nonetheless still writing professionally is very, very is helpful in a number of ways. I think you learn about pitfalls like cliches and things like that. None of that is acceptable when you're a journalist. Right. So you learn to kind of cleanse your work of some of that, not all of it. I mean, you still do these things, but you understand what casting a cold eye over your work means, coming back to it, looking at it critically, being able to try and detach from it and read it afresh. You are very, very, very resilient to criticism, which is very important. I get these incredibly polite letters from my editors at Bloomsbury with all the things that they think perhaps we could maybe just tweak this, Whereas I'm used to, a news editor on the phone saying this is going in the bin, rewrite it. So I'm really relaxed about that and used to my work being thrown in the bin. So and the publishing industry is very polite compared to the media.
It is very.
So that's helpful. And I guess the biggest thing though is keeping your reader in the forefront of your mind all the time. And I noticed that with journalists who have become writers, like Colette Macbeth and Fiona Barton. They have that discipline about them where it's not about you, it's not about your ego. In a way, it's not really even about the story you want to write. It is, but you have to make it work for the other person. You have to write the story you would want to read. It's not so much the story you want to write, but it's the story that you would want to read as a reader. The reader's more important than you are. And you have to, and if your prose is dragging or you've got written a whole bit that you love, but it's boring to the reader and it slows everything down, it's just got to go. It's got to, and you can't always see that, of course, as the writer, but it's very, very good to have the training and the background to appreciate that is the case and that those things have to go.
Yeah.
And that you have to be. I just wanted to write a book that was going to be really fun for people to read, really escapist, a sort of the book that's just easy that you just fall into and you can't put it down because you really want to know what happens, but also a thriller that is satisfying because the characters feel real. And, I didn't want it to be like a throwaway book, but I wanted it to feel complex and satisfying, but I also wanted it to be really fun and pacey and enjoyable to read. And that's the kind of book that I love that combines those things. So that's what I was aspiring to. And I think thinking like a reader is the most important thing. And as a journalist, you're trained to do that.
That's brilliant. And that phrase you use, casting a cold eye on your work. We've spoken to agents on here previously and editors who said, put it away for 6 weeks. And then when you come back to it, but you, as a journalist, you've got a matter of hours to sort of if not even less than that. So how do you train yourself to sort of look at it with that cold eye? Or is it just
quite hard if you're a news journalist? You have to sometimes just take 2 minutes away. It's true, and then you have to try and cut. But you can sometimes it's reading it differently. So if you read things out loud, it's a very different experience. If you read something, sometimes you change the font or you print it out. And you read it, it's a very different reading experience. I mean, my recent with the other mothers, when it was typeset, I suddenly saw all these problems with it.
Yeah.
Just from it looking suddenly like a book, not problems, but little mistakes. And I hadn't seen them before. I just hadn't seen them when it was in a Word document, which was really interesting to me and annoying as well. But 100% when you're writing books, you have to put them away in a cupboard for 6 months. And I kind of did that without even meaning to, because like I said, I had this great experience of the Agent's Day with Faber and the end of my maternity leave, and I managed to finish this very scrappy first draft. But then I had to go back to work and I had to start a new job and I had to do all that. And so the next time I came back to it, I was when I booked some annual leave to kind of look at it again and do an edit. And I came back to it completely afresh, and it was so helpful. I mean, it was sort of terrifying because when you do that, you do go back to it and you think, oh God, this is awful. Yeah. There's so much that needs fixing, but it's only then you can see it. And then you just do a whole big rewrite. And I actually did that a couple of times because I basically used up all my annual leave on writing. So I was kind of moonlighting, because I was doing my really, really demanding job and had a young daughter. And then I was having to, just take annual leave in order to do writing because I could only really do it in a block of time, I found. So we didn't really go on holiday for a couple of years. very much at all, but it was, worth it.
Absolutely. The other thing I see that you do, and you're a lot of writers I think can learn from this, is you will disconnect yourself from the internet when you write. You will, so when it comes to sort of not just carving out time, but sort of carving out a kind of mental space as well, is that something you're still doing now?
Yes, I do disconnect from the internet. I try to. Twitter's really unhelpful. To be honest, the Wi-Fi in the British Library is terrible, so that's kind of helpful.
That's true.
I go often there to work. So yes, I think reducing distractions if you can is really important. I tend to work away from my house just because I think if you're at home and you've got young children, all you can see in your house is mess, things that need doing.
Yeah.
Whereas if I go to the British Library, it's a really studious space, nice space, and I feel like I've commuted to work in a way, and I'm going somewhere with a sense of seriousness about this is a proper job. It is my job now. It's not just some sideline. So I need to take it seriously and devote proper working time to it. So I do that, and I do find that very helpful.
Any tips for getting a seat at the British Library? Because whenever I go there, it's rammed. I end up going all the way to the top and then coming all the way back now. I think the Wi-Fi will be fine if 3,000 people weren't using it at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a tip, but I don't know if I want to share it on this podcast.
No, fair enough. Tell me afterwards. But it's a great place to write if you can find a seat.
It's a great space if you can get a seat,
Brilliant. So what's coming next, Katherine? We've got, your debut is Greenwich Park. You've got Other Mothers. What else is on the horizon?
Yeah, so The Other Mothers is released on the 8th of June. You can pre-order it now. I'm very excited about all that. And then it's released in America later this year as well, in December. And then at the moment, I'm working on a third novel, which I can't say much about at the moment, but which I'm very, very excited about. And I think, it's for me, the big change has been becoming a writer full time. That's only really happened for me in the last 12 months. I'm still kind of adjusting. So when you were asking my tips, I just thought, oh God, if you knew the chaos in which I exist. But
I think that's normal. For
me, I'm really excited to be doing some festivals this year. I'm going to be at Bloody Scotland on a panel, which I'm really excited about in the summer. I'm going to go to Harrogate for the first time. So yeah, getting into lots of crime festivals. And just trying to meet more readers, meet more authors, and I suppose be a bit more of a kind of, professional.
No, you'll have Harrogate and Bloody Scotland. Fantastic. You'll have a great time.
Yeah.
Actually, you mentioned America there. I do just want to ask, because I saw in an interview that you went through that process of changing pave walks to sidewalks and bins to trash cans and stuff like that. But the books are written by a Londoner and they're set in London. So, was this kind of a fait accompli? Did you have to do this, or was this a concession that you made, or how far did you go with that?
I think all authors for the American market basically have to do it. With my books, it's light Americanization. So it's not kind of, then I think it's very carefully done. And my publisher in America are incredible. And I did find it strange the first time. And I sort of thought, is this really? And I just talked to my agent. I said, they always do this. Like, do all my pavements have to turn into sidewalks? And do all my bins have to turn into trash cans? And my agent said, well, if you think, she looked at what they'd done and she said, you should really see some of my sort of English Victorian novels, historical novels that have been sort of, basically, it's done with the best intention, which is to make your book as accessible and meaningful to that market as possible. And what is really interesting is we do have such different language. And a lot of the things that they wanted me to change to American words, I didn't understand those American words. Like, for example, so, kids have diggers. They play with diggers. So, like, diggers like, tractors.
Like a Tonka toy or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So they wanted to change them to backhoes. I mean, what is a backhoe? I've never heard of a backhoe in my life. Because I kind of thought, oh, I'll understand American words. It's just that they don't understand my American words.
Yeah.
But quite a lot of these things I just did not understand. And brand names for, they don't have Calpol. They don't have Calpol over there.
What?
No, they don't have Tylenol. So, I can't. It was kind of embarrassing how many mentions of Calpol there were in my book. But,
it's
for parenthood.
Any parent in the UK, it's like used every other sentence. Yeah.
So yes, there was a lot of Tylenol in the Other Mothers US version. But it's done, like I say, it's to make your book accessible to a different marketplace, and it's a form of translation, I guess. And so for me, it was I wanted readers there to understand and be able to relate to the book. And really the essentials of the book are completely unchanged, the essentials of the story. And of course, and there are certain things that, wherever I've pushed back, it's been fine. Like I drew the line at cookies biscuits being replaced by cookies, because they're just not the same. And also dialogue, all the dialogue is the same. Yeah. You don't have British characters saying
Good,
Tylenol.
Right. Gotcha.
It's just that it's the background, so you understand the prose. So the way that it's been done has actually made total sense to me, and I'm totally on board with it.
Brilliant stuff. Well, Katherine, this has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Folks, The Other Mothers, actually, I think by the time this goes live, Other Mothers should be out now. So grab a copy, and Greenwich Park as well. And very much looking forward to whatever comes next. Katherine, great to speak to you. Speak to you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. Wow. Head of news of the Sunday Times. That is a big hitting journalist.
Yeah, it's good stuff, isn't it? Yeah.
Wow, it's absolutely amazing. And another story of a journalist turned author. It reminded me a lot, actually, of Michael Connolly and Michael Connolly's journey in many ways. Yeah. I mean,
we've seen that transition quite a few times. It's something we can talk about it more in the extended version, because I want to talk about how that journalistic mindset can help you as a writer and how we can all get that. But it's always inspirational to see people kind of make that big life change. And I'm very aware that blokes don't get, I mentioned it in the interview, blokes don't get asked things like, well, did your life change when your baby arrived? Women only get asked those questions. But Katherine and I spoke about it before the recording and said, look, do you want to talk? And she was keen to talk about it. So I think, and it is a life change that a lot of people are going to recognize, men and women, when children come along and ruin your life, it does change I was talking to a bloke this morning, a director I know, and he's got a 3-year-old who's now going to nursery, and it completely, your life is topsy-turvy. It's wonderful child, it's all great stuff, but trying to find time to work and be productive and be creative is a real challenge.
I think it's very underrepresented within writing circles. I think of working mums and working dads. I think these days it's, I hear more and more of dads staying at home now, and it's becoming more common. It's still not as common as the tradition, if you like. But I think it's underrepresented because it's one of those things where, and I know that we've got thousands of people probably listening right now who are saying, yeah, this is me. I want to write a book. I'm listening to the podcast. Maybe that's all I do each week to engage with the idea of book writing. It's maybe still a dream of mine to write a book. And I can't begin to tell you, Mark, the amount of people I've chatted to in kind of upfront chats with people interested in joining the academy that are mums and a few dads that have said, I don't know how I can write with this busy life that I've got with young kids, or even with older kids, or just with lots of kids. You know, if you've got more, I mean, one child is huge. I mean, I've had 3 children, and I'm still there. Like, I'm still.
Yeah.
I mean, I am that single mum in many ways when it comes to looking after the kids, and I just think that there's a lot more that we can do to help support people in that situation. But it does ultimately boil down to the situation in many people's lives, whether it's children, whether it's a busy job, whether it's just so many commitments that you have to do, whether it's, you know, making ends meet. Writing, we have to somehow, if we're in that situation, we have to force writing in. And once we force it in, which can be really hard to do, once we give it its little space, 200 words a day, whatever it might be, but once we give it that little space, everything kind of shuffles to move around it. And I got the sense that for Katherine, she talked about this idea of writing being a place, a mental space for her to go into.
Yes.
And the thing about this, which I don't think people fully get unless they've done it, is that it's not just about writing to write a book. It's also about what it does for your mental health and what it does to recharge your batteries if you are a busy working person or a working parent. That it's you making a declaration to yourself of, look, even though it's only 15 minutes a day that I'm going to give myself, I'm going to do it because it's a way of declaring to myself that this is really important. It's my little gift in the busy week. It's my little gift to myself. It's like going and buying, you know, if you're into like flowers, for example, it's like going and buying yourself a bunch of flowers, or in my case, a bag of Maltesers or something. But it's about treating yourself to something that is just for you to enjoy. And I think that people miss that in many cases when they're so focused on writing the book. Even if you just write and the book, you know, it's not really coming together, but you're giving yourself that gift of writing. It recharges you. It increases your mental health. It makes you find a little bit of peace in your busy day or busy week. And it's really interesting to hear Katherine talk about that, because once you make the space, once you wedge that little kind of, we put that wedge in with a hammer, it can start to then grow a little bit. And then before you know it, you're writing a whole book or you're becoming a published author. And that's how it starts for me.
Absolutely. It's so important to I mean, I just remember that certainly the first 3 years of being a parent, and then when a second one comes along, it's you are in danger of losing your mind and losing your identity. You are suddenly the parent. You are suddenly,
yes,
and you're kind of thinking, hang on, what am I anymore? I was this person. I was that. I was driven. I was a journalist or a writer or a singer or whatever, or whatever you were beforehand, and suddenly you're just the parent. So the writing, if anything, is even more important when you're a parent, because it's part of your identity. It's part of who you are, and it's part of your voice. We always talk about voice when we talk about writing, and it's if you can keep that active, I think you're much more likely to cling on to your marbles through the whole experience.
Oh,
as well.
I completely agree. And I think as well that if you write whilst you're going through it, it's like journaling. Have you ever tried journaling about last week?
Yeah,
you can't remember the emotion of what you remember, the facts of what happened, but you can't remember the emotion. Whereas if you ever read a journal entry that you did in the evening when you've had a really bad day, you know what I mean? It's like the emotion is there. And so use the busyness, use the craziness of your life to make your book phenomenal, because that's what connects with people. It's interesting as well, Mark, because I know that we're both going through this as parents. This sense of this feeling of empty nesting. So I'm about 2 months away from my second of my 3 kids leaving home,
right?
And I'm very lucky to have a third one who's going to be around for a few years longer. But it's the tipping point for me. Like I had 3 at home, and I'll now only have 1 at home, and so it's this weird sense of like, oh my gosh, I have to start working towards reclaiming my identity of who I was before I had kids. Because you're so right. When we become parents, because kids' needs shout louder than everything else, we need to be there for them. We need to drive them to their clubs. We need to pick them up from school. We need to help them when they're struggling. We need to feed them, bathe them, clean. I mean, it's just relentless. And our identity becomes a parent. And that's actually why a lot of it breaks my heart, but I've heard lots of stories of couples who, when their final child leaves, the couple look at each other and say, "Oh, who are you?
Who the hell are you?"
Yeah, it's true. And you know what? It's really sad, Mark. But we had some friends.
I shouldn't laugh, but no,
no. I mean, I'm not. I mean, it is funny. But the sadness in it is that I've had quite a few friends of mine that have broken up once the kids left home because they lost their identity as a couple because they both became co-parents and they had this role. I'm tag team 1, tag team 2 in our case when we had that. And it is about having to rebuild your identity or rediscover the identity that you had before. Now, writing for most of us was happening before we were parents. It's not something new that we start. I mean, we were all writing at school. We all did creative stories at school. So it's not something that we're kind of starting fresh and going, oh, I think I want to become a writer. It's often something that's been stopped. It's like our book Back to Reality. It's the giving up. In fact, everything we're talking about, Mark, is a Back to Reality thing.
Just one big plug for Back to Reality.
It actually is, isn't it? It's about the whole theme of the story is sacrificing, your dream for your parenting, for parenthood.
Yeah.
And we can't stress enough this journey that we have to start transitioning to as our kids get to that place of leaving home. Now, for everyone who's got young kids and they're thinking, oh, that's miles away, believe me, it goes faster than you can ever imagine, and it gets quicker. So on that note, we should also talk about something Katie mentioned, which was working away from home. She talked about going to the British Library, and I really, really, really like that idea. We've always talked about creating a space in your home, or if you're lucky enough to build something in the garden or have a little shed where you go, right. But removing yourself, if you're a parent and you're in the home full time, you're now working from home full time, which I think, something like 33% of people are now working from home after COVID, which is huge. Getting outside of the house actually can be really important for getting a different perspective for your writing and getting the space to write.
Completely. Funnily enough, the local water authority here has blamed people working from home for water shortages in the UK.
Wow.
I mean, don't get me started. But yeah, I know lots of writers. I'm lucky enough to write here. But, today I was meeting someone at a cafe and before they came along, I was doing a little writing there. And it is nice just to get a shift away from your usual space. And when I was working full time, I would always get out of the office because I didn't want to write at my office desk. I would go out of the office, and I used to write at the Curzon Cinema in Soho and go into their basement, where I knew I could have a cup of tea, a little bag of chocolate covered raisins, and get a good solid sort of hour of writing done without being disturbed. And it was put on a lot of weight. But it was great. That's how I wrote Robot Overlords. That's how I knocked out the first draft of that. So it can be hugely important. And the thing is, if you are a parent, I think we had this with Katie Ford last week. She was saying, she would come home from dropping the kids off at school, and immediately there's a pile of washing. There's the washing up to do. There's this to do. There's that to do. Whereas if you can just delay that for a little while,
go via the cafe or via the library on the way home, right? Or sit in the car.
Come back to what you're saying. Treat yourself first. Treat yourself to that thing, and then that stuff, can come.
I love it. I think as
Easier said than done. I appreciate it. I know lots of listeners will be rolling their eyes, but it's up to you to shape your day and make those choices. And it's. But
you know
tricky.
what, Mark? Do you know what? The laundry can wait 15 minutes. We're not talking about taking the weekend off or the week to write. 200-word challenge is about 15 minutes a day, roughly on average. The laundry can wait for 15 minutes. The dishes can wait for 15 minutes. But get this, if you do the dishes after you've done your 15 minutes of writing, what are you going to be thinking about when you do the dishes or the ironing? You're going to be continuing you get a little bit of a warm up, few words written down. Oh, that's a really interesting idea. And then you spend the next hour developing the plot in your head, which is putting another hour of time in your book.
That is exactly. I mean, I don't want to brag, but I got that down to a fine art because I'm the now at home person. Claire goes out and works now, and I'm the one at home.
You're the home husband.
And I write first thing in the morning. I'm lucky enough to be able to do that. And then once she's gone to work, I've finished, and then I do a few chores. And that's exactly what's happening. It's all ticking away in the back of my brain. And then I come back and might make some more notes or whatever and blah, blah, blah. And, so it is very much a simmering in the background kind of thing that's happening,
Do you know what, Mark? I've suddenly realised when we've been banging on, particularly me, about this idea of people trying a writing habit first thing in the morning, I realised this is a big part of the benefit you get doing that. Because if you write first thing in the morning, you've got the rest of the day for your conscious mind to kind of think about, and your subconscious mind to think about your story. If you write last thing at night when you're tired and you're up against going to bed and trying to stay awake, now there is something to be said that you then spend your sleep time subconsciously working through plot, and you wake up the next morning and you go, "Ooh," and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that both work, and both you have to decide what works for you. In fact, just this Monday we had an Academy life coaching session, and one of our amazing Academates, who's actually a screenwriter for like films like worked on films like Happy Feet and some pretty major stuff. You know what I'm talking about? He said he's been trying to write in the morning and he's really struggled. And the only time he gets is in the evening right now, but he's working towards becoming a morning writer eventually. But so there's benefits to both. But I personally think that if you bank those words in the morning, you're then getting a free 12 hours of thinking and ideas and having your radar open. Because this is the other thing. When you go to bed and sleep, yes, you dream and you have some crazy ideas and stuff come up. You might wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and write them all down. Brilliant. Yep. But when you go out into the world, or you watch the news, or you chat with your family and you're doing stuff, that's when ideas and new things can present themselves, when you're actively awake. And if you bank your words in the morning, you get the bonus of having all that time for the rest of the day for those beautiful things, the happy accidents, the random thoughts, the connecting thoughts to come into your mind. So can't stress enough how important this is. Yeah. It's interesting.
No. Yeah.
Now, disconnecting from the internet, I guess leaving home is a way of kind of doing that. But have you ever tried that, Mark? Have you ever tried just like literally cutting off your internet access at the beginning of your writing session?
Every morning.
Is that what you do?
I do it. Yeah. I've got an app here. Well, I don't cut it off, because every now and then I have to look something up, which I know I shouldn't, but I do.
That's why I think it's so powerful.
Yeah, I've got an app here called Forest. I'm sure I've mentioned this before.
I've heard about Forest. Yeah.
Where you plant trees for every sort of half hour. So I focused for an hour and 35 minutes today. That's an hour and 35 without looking at the internet. And here's my forest. So my forest so far this year, hang on, bear with me. I've focused for 254 hours and 16 minutes.
Wow.
I'm most focused on a Tuesday. And I'm most focused at 8 o'clock every morning. So yeah. So it's good. It does. I mean, look, weirdly, we spoke about this on, because I have the Wednesday surgery in the academy, and we were talking about finding this focus. And I said, look, there's no one just sits down, opens a laptop and starts typing. That, you'd have to be an Android to do that. I will sit down, I'll open it up, and then I will put the app on. In the course of putting the app on, I'll go, oh, there's a message from Mark DeVoe. What's that? Oh, it's about Glastonbury. I'll reply that later. But so there are distractions. You have to ease yourself into it. But once the app is on, and I put the do not disturb thing on as well, the function, which means I don't get any pings or anything like that. Now, there is usually a point about 40 minutes in where I might hit a wall, I might get stuck, I'm staring out the window, and you can drift. I've also got this app called Merlin, which identifies bird sounds.
Okay, where's this going? I know. I've literally just heard a bird outside my window as you said that, bizarrely.
I've got the window open because it's so hot. So I did spend 10 minutes the other day recording birds and going, oh, the common chaffinch.
Are you officially becoming a bird spotter, Mark?
I might be, yeah. Oh, wow. So, I get distracted like anyone, but the goal for me is to achieve that kind of liminal state where I'm just focusing on the words and nothing else. And I get there every day. There's some days it's like I've been to another world, and I'm not kidding. It is like it's like meditation. It's like coming out of a warm bath, a hot bath or a sauna or whatever. So those are the good days. But it's that thing, building a habit, getting into the more you get into that state, the more your mind gets used to it. God, I'm starting to sound like you. If me from 6 years ago could listen to this, you'd be going, who the hell are you?
I know. It's all rubbish. Do we have to switch places? No, get yourself a copy of Fortran magazine. Like, go on. It's just brilliant. But it's so true. And I do think, I practice meditation. I practice yoga a lot. And I've experienced that the more that you do it, the quicker and easier it is to get into that state. Mm-hmm. Like if I want to get into a meditative state now, and I just give myself permission to just like stop doing stuff, which is quite rare these days, I can go deep really quickly. 10 years ago, I'll be sitting there fidgeting, kind of, it's like every sport you ever try, it's every skill you ever do. It's like trying to learn how to be a better writer. This getting into this state where I think you can access this, I call it an infinite ocean of creativity, Mark, but we won't go into that because I know that'll probably I probably have to now start notching this up to really. I'm like, what can I freak Mark out now with my language? But no, there is this kind of sense that the creativity's out there, and we can all go with either with a thimble or a bucket. Help yourself, folks. There's enough for everyone out there. What do you want? And when you start going deeper, you start going with your bucket, and then you then connect a hose pipe to it. And I just think that there's a lot that we don't understand here, but hearing you talk about it, it totally resonates with me, because that's what I have experienced in many different ways, whether it's track and field, in that kind of state of mind before a race, or whether it's meditation, or just getting into that place of flow with writing. There's something there. And if people are listening to this going, I've never experienced that, trust us, it exists. Everyone can access it. It takes a bit of practice and discipline, and actually a bit of belief that it does actually happen. And hearing you talk about it, Mark, is great, because you're the poster boy for this kind of
I'm the
stuff
most cynical I'll get out there.
Well, but exactly. No, if it would happen for you, Mark, just imagine, right?
I've just described it as my happy place in the past, and it is my.
Yeah, it's whatever word. The trouble is, we all get so lost in words, and words scare people, and words are sometimes a bit mystical and strange, and I think we call it whatever we want to call it. But when we experience it, we know that it exists. And whatever the language that works for you is the most important thing. But experiencing it, that's the whole point of showing up, right? And when it happens, it's like you say, it's like coming out of a warm bath. It's magical. And I bet when you have those sessions, Mark, you write your best work, right?
Well, opinions are.
most of the time, it's good. It's more often a good writing session compared to that's a pile of rubbish.
Yeah, no, it is more often gooderer. That's gooderer.
You see,
but look, I actually think it's nothing to do with the quality of the words. It's part of the process, because I'm in first draft land at the moment, and a lot of what I'm going to write is going to be rewritten. So it's not perfect, it's not great, but I'm just happy to be here. And it's the thing I love doing most.
Don't squander those opportunities, folks. They're out there for you to take. You've also just said a word, Mark, which I want us to claim right now on the podcast. The word is draftland. I love it.
First draftland, yeah.
Not even first draftland. It's like draftland. It's like
draftland, yes.
Draftland. It sounds like some HBO series, but I think we should claim that as the stage of writing that all of us are in, until we get to the point where we've finished all of our drafts. So we're all in draftland. So let's all just start using the word draftland. I think it's okay to allow ourselves to be in that space.
If I ever become one of those writers who does a how to write a book, I think I'll call it draftland.
Stay claims it instantly. Boom.
Yep. Trademark.
I think it's good though, because I think it reminds us that it's drafting. It's not perfection. It's experimenting. It's playing with words. It's seeing what happens. Love it. Let's talk about light Americanization, because that was another thing. I love that term. And it's a different way of kind of looking at not converting, but tweaking your book just for a different audience, rather than thinking you have to rewrite the whole thing so it makes sense to someone in a different culture or language.
Yeah, Katherine said that everyone does this, and they don't. But I think if you are writing a commercial thriller, that the publisher is going to go big with in the States, then it is something that happens. And I know we've got someone in the BXP team, and I won't mention them because they haven't announced their deal yet, who's just gone through this. And I was getting messages from them saying, is this normal to change this, this, and this? And I think if you're doing a kind of a commercial thriller, then a light dusting of American terms is kind of inevitable. It just annoys me it doesn't happen the other way around.
I was just going to ask that question. Does it happen the other way around? It doesn't, does it?
No, it really does. I mean, you and I, we grew up reading Stephen King and all these American authors, and we'd read them and there'd be all these things that we didn't know about, and we'd go and look them up. But then the thing is, America's a massive market, and American readers are used to, having this done for them. So I don't think it's going to change overnight. But, we're back to reality. We put
I've just opened it up because at the back, see, we did have this debate about Americanization, because our book, ironically, is set in the UK and the US. And what we ended up deciding to do, for anyone watching this on YouTube, at the back of our book, there is the glossary for non-Brits. And out the gate, we start with Marks and Spencer's and the Colin the Caterpillar cake. And there's a whole paragraph about the history of that.
And how often does the Colin the Caterpillar cake come up in the BXP team?
Once a week. Once a week at least.
And hobnobs, chocolate hobnobs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you make a thing of it. I mean, you must have seen Queeve McDonald, friend of the podcast, long-time supporter of the podcast, well, massive best-selling author. In one of his books, he put a thing about using S's instead of Z's in his words. And he said, even though this is set in America, I'm Irish and I don't want to upset my Irish mother. And it's gone viral. It crops up every week in every kind of, and it's brilliant. But, so he has said to his audience, look, Americans, this book's, don't start giving me 1-star reviews because I use S's instead of Z's because I'm Irish. This is how I write, kind of thing. So you can have a statement of intent like that, or you can have a glossary. But I think if you're working with a major traditional publisher who is going to try and sell it across all of the states, which could result in tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of copies of the book being sold, then maybe you need to go, okay, well, I'm willing to give on this one a little bit. Yeah. And I think what's great is that Katherine didn't change the dialogue. She wasn't going to have the characters suddenly using Americanisms, although we use a lot of them anyway. Just the prose, just the descriptive prose, Yeah. And she drew the line at biscuits, which I salute her for.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's some things you just should never cross the line over.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, I mean, and if you're self-publishing and you think, well, I can't spend the time or afford to do two different versions of the book, which is a reality for many people. Do what we did, create the glossary of Brits. I mean, in our book, we've got... if you want to learn about what these things are, if you're listening to this outside the UK, you might be interested in finding out what Waitrose is, what we mean by yonks, the Duke of Edinburgh Award, Barnet, Nando's, Fascinators, and the great British word, blag. Love it. So, that's all in our glossary. So check out the book if you want to
I did have to... After listening back to the interview, I did have to look up what a backhoe was. I wasn't familiar with that.
Oh, yeah, no, I've heard of a backhoe.
Yeah, so a backhoe, BACKHOE. And it's basically a digger truck. It's what we do over here. Because over here, we have a place called Diggerland, which is in Kent, not too far from me. I think there's one up north as well, where you can go and play in all the diggers. It's brilliant.
Backhoe land doesn't really work, does it?
That doesn't translate in the UK either.
For obvious reasons. Anyway, moving swiftly on. This is a family show. We're going to have a great chat in the extended about some really fascinating things that came up in the interview with Katherine Faulkner. We're going to talk about casting a critical eye of your work. What we can learn from the demands of journalism and how we all as authors need to develop those calluses and the skill to do that. And also about how to keep readers in the forefront of our minds as we write our book, writing the story that we want to read, and thinking like a reader. This is gold dust, folks. So seriously, please do join us. We'll also talk about the idea of kind of printing out work using tricks, and we're going to share some extra tricks of how you can, when you're going through editing your book, how you can kind of disconnect from the original document that you wrote. So if you would like to join us to hear about that and more, then please pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support, become a patron, and you will get access to all of the extended editions of this podcast. So Mark, before we dive into the wins, one thing we didn't mention is, Katherine talked about this amazing structure and accountability that the academy she joined was a part of. And we did do a bit of research. And just for people that are interested in that, the structure and accountability that an academy can give, I just wanted to mention that the Bestseller Academy is about 12 times less expensive than there are other academies. Absolutely. And one of them got a very big plug today, but there are other academies. And so if you're interested in finding out more about that, that's academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. Is that cheeky of me to say that, Mark?
I know. I love it. I love it, Mr. D. I mean, look, we're applying the same principles, this accountability, the structure. You get one-to-ones with us, so it's
you've got communities of different writers from different genres that you get to know and learn together. You're on a common mission. It's all good stuff, but absolutely.
But I did have a look, and when I saw what they were charging, I was like,
bit of an intake of breath.
Sorry, Faber.
So, folks, let's dive in, Mark, and talk about this week's wins.
Oh boy! Well, listen, our episode with JD Kirk, episode 456, is just the gift that keeps on giving. So you remember we had Ed last week talking about how he realized that he had aphantasia. We've had a couple of other listeners as well get in touch. So Sarah Zeman, who I gave us that poem a few weeks ago, she says, really enjoyed this episode. My aphantasia is not quite total. I dream in pictures, and when dropping off, I can see things vaguely. But I'm jealous at how prolific it's made Barry. It makes me good at dialogue, though, I think, because I always thought mind's eye. She says, I also always thought mind's eye was a figure of speech. So again, just amazing that it's touching all these listeners. Anastasia Gammon on Twitter, who is at Stasia Writes, she said, would you believe me if I told you that listening to this episode is what made me realize that other people can actually see things in their mind, and apparently I have aphantasia, because that's exactly what happened. And she goes on, I said, look, thanks for letting us know. Do you think knowing this is going to help with your writing from now on? And she says, I've always struggled with descriptive writing and often completely forget to describe places at all. So now I know this is probably why. I'll definitely have it in mind. Also, I think I can now officially say that making Pinterest boards for projects is not procrastination. That's another thing we spoke about. So listen, this is the episode that's
huge.
Just changing lives, isn't it, man?
Wow.
It's opening people's eyes. So if anyone out there, again, Barry, who writes as JD Kirk, he's been great as well. He's been replying to these people on social media, and we're seeing a kind of solidarity there as well, which I absolutely love. So if you think this is you, this has helped you, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Other people as well. Your superpower, Mr. D. Paul Garner on Twitter, who is at GrubelSign65, said that episode was fascinating. Thank you. I developed the skill of being able to block my nose, i.e. engage the flaps and not taste, to survive the 1970s school dinners.
Yeah, it's so true. Cabbage, semolina, all that. Oh, gosh. That's amazing. So there's three of us now.
Yeah,
we need to obviously form a little club. If anyone else wants to join the superpowers,
nose flappers.
I can't believe I said that. There's certain ways of describing things that I've just grabbed in the moment on the podcast, and that's one I think I'm going to regret in 20 years from now when it probably becomes a Wikipedia entry.
It's no draft land, is it?
It's no draft land. I was going to say. Oh, brilliant! Oh, I'm glad I'm not alone though. I'm feeling
good.
like yeah.
This is what this podcast is all about. I had a lovely tweet from Diane Wordsworth, who's been doing the 200 word a day challenge. She said, oh no, I'd lost 31 words today during final revisions, but Diary of a Pussycat, a year in the life of a freelance writer, is now finished and cooling ahead of proofreading. I love that, cooling ahead of, she's baked a book. So Diane, I just want to say that editing, we have what's the exchange rate for editing again, Mr. D?
It's 20 minutes of editing is the equivalent of 200 words.
200 words. So yeah, apply that. But Diane goes on, she says, I wouldn't have finished it yet without the 200 words a day challenge. We're getting these every week now. But
is that a non-fiction book?
It is a non-fiction.
It's a non-fiction book. Well,
There
what are
we
the chances?
go.
So
Yeah.
maybe there
Spooky.
is something in this, Mark. Maybe I should.
I think there is. I think there is.
Yeah.
But Tammy Mercer-Gervais, who's part of the BXP group on Facebook, she said, I have nowhere else to share this with, so I'm sharing it here with the other writers. In April, I attended a one-week writing retreat where I experimented with a few dictation apps and settled on a basic system that I could use on my phone. I then attended a dictation webinar, and as part of that I learned about morning pages to build the habit, and today was day 61 of dictating morning pages. Some days I make time to transcribe, but not every day. That's the next part of building the habit. I dictate between 800 and 5,000 words each day, and this has become my morning routine. And Tammy was part of the whole 200 words a day challenge, and that counts. Dictation counts. That's what I want to say.
It's all words.
And Tammy's saying, I'm feeling pretty good and just wanted to share. Listen, this is, and what's interesting is other people in the group came aboard. Ian W. Sainsbury, award-winning author, came in, and he said, he uses dictation. I think Queeve uses it as well. So, and as AI sort of makes this thing more user-friendly, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more dictating from authors. So Tammy, you're ahead of the curve there.
Yeah, that's right. I want to know from Tammy, maybe Tammy can report back, 5,000 words. What is that? What's the exchange rate in dictation? Like how long did you speak for to get 5,000 words? Because that's phenomenal. Yeah. I bet you it's a lot quicker than if you wrote it. There is actually some kind of stat out there. I should probably dig it out, which is, speed of dictation versus the speed of writing. I think it's multiple times, isn't it? But we'll find that stat for you by the end of the show.
Brilliant. I had a lovely, lovely win from Poppy T. Perry in the BXP group. It's actually Natalie Perry, who long-term listeners will know. Natalie helped me around a children's writers conference many years ago in the podcast, and she sort of mentioned, I'm writing and I'm an illustrator, and and what's great is we've seen her journey as a writer just blossom and blossom and blossom. And just this week, she's launched her own website. She went on the group, she asked for advice, people gave her all kinds of advice, and today poppytperry.com went live. As she said, it was tough, devoured many hours, but it's done. She even wrote a blog about building the website, and I tell you what, the colors, you can tell she's an artist. The color is one of the most vibrant author websites I've ever seen. So I'm going to pop a link in the show notes to that. And I know, I can't say much more, there's more to come from Poppy T. Perry in the future. This is one of our listeners who's been with us from pretty much the beginning. They're evolving and they're becoming something amazing. So this is why we do this, isn't it, Mr. D?
Absolutely brilliant. Fantastic stuff. I have actually just found out, Mark, as well, that this is a very rough science here, but it takes about 5 minutes to read 1,000 words aloud. So not dictating in your head. But if we do the exchange rate with the, say 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes for 200 words, that is 5 to, no, hang on, what's that? 1,000 words. I can't even do the math. Hang on.
Man does maths on podcasts. It's award-winning stuff.
It's a new segment. Okay, 200 words, 1,000 words, that would be an hour and 40 minutes versus 5 minutes of reading. Now, reading words, but obviously it's going to be slower if you're thinking of what you're going to be saying. Yeah. So let's double it. So let's call it roughly 10 minutes for 1,000 words versus an hour and 40, which gives us a multiplier mark of
Don't
10.
ask me. I don't do maths.
Yeah, 10. 10 to 1. I know that's probably not exact, but just to give us an idea, we're talking of multiples, maybe up to 10 times the amount of output if you get really good at it. And I know with dictation, it's one of those practices we talked at the beginning of the show about practicing getting good at it. You get better with dictation the more you play with it. First time you do it, and I think this is a problem, the first time people do it, it's really weird and it's hard. And I've done it and tried it and it just feels awkward. But once you get used to doing it, you get better at it and you get more refined. So yeah, more stories on your dictation successes, please. More wins.
Yes. If you want to get in touch, we're on social media. Facebook, we are Bestseller Experiment. Twitter and Instagram, we are at BestsellerXP, or pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com. There's a contact tab there. You can email us directly. And if you've been inspired by Katherine or any of our authors or any of our listeners or any of the amazing stories, please subscribe, rate and review the podcast on iTunes. As always, thanks to our editors, Dave and JD.
Brilliant stuff. And if you are interested in joining the Academy, folks, down the road, there's going to be a webinar coming up, and also the opportunity to get a one-to-one with me, doing a mini coaching session and telling you more about the Academy. So if you're interested in doing that, pop along to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com and send your details to us through the contact form.
It's a sound investment. You won't be squandering anything.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's an investment in yourself.
Totally. Brilliant stuff. And if you want to try the 200-word challenge, you simply go to 200wordchallenge.com, sign up. Can you write 200 words a day for 7 days? That's the initial challenge that we've set you all. And who knows what might happen. You may even develop, like many, many of the writers listening to this podcast, the writing habit of a lifetime. So, Mark, have a great, great writing week.
You too, sir.
Enjoy the warmth of the summer, hopefully at your end as well. And to everyone out there, we wish you the very, very best this week. We hope you have your best writing week ever. Why not? Go for it.
Yeah.
So it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And it's a goodbye from Mark 2, who hasn't forgotten the promise Mr. D made at the beginning of the podcast. So, listeners.
Brilliant stuff. All right, folks. See you next week. Goodbye.
Bye.